look at my phone got wet. Welcome everybody. How's it going? Welcome to This Is How to Get Into Guided by Voices Guide by me, your guide to Guided by Voices guide. So, today I'm going to pick out, obviously there's a lot of albums, 43 albums and counting by Guided by Voices alone, plus God knows how much else. And I'm going to narrow it down to 5 Guided by Voices albums and 5 non-Guided by Voices albums that I think will help. 5 studio Guided by Voices albums and 5 other releases that I think will maybe make it all make sense a little bit easier. Because, you know, you could ask people, what's your favorite, what's this, and everyone's going to give you a different answer. I think this is the 5 concrete album, like, best answers currently. Concrete is obviously also always subject to change. You never know when they're going to bulldoze the shopping centre and build affordable housing. So, in the interest of not wasting any time for them to announce said Mickey Mouse flats, we shall dive into it. So, there's 43 Guided by Voices studio albums. This is, I think, even though there's 43, I think this is a pretty easy one to go with. I think I've already said this before, you must start with B1000 and Alien Lanes. It is the only place to start. I was thinking about this earlier. I was like, what is so special about B1000? It's quite soulful. There's a lot of, like, I know that he was trying to do like Otis Redding style vocals on Buzzards and Dreadful Crows, but then it appears in other places in the album, like the end of Echo's Myron, he starts doing these sort of like quite Motown-y backing vocals. Couldn't it be? And it's kind of, it comes up all over the place. Demons Are Real as well, kind of has that sort of Otis Redding thing. It's quite a soulful album for GBV at least. And then Alien Lanes is kind of just like this sort of completely wild ersatz rock and roll album, 28 songs in 40 minutes. It doesn't sound like it makes sense until you're there and you listen to it. And when I was at Euroheat Fest last year and Band of Pricks played it in full, oh, it's just magnificent. Hearing those songs at full blast like that. It's an astonishing album, and those 2 albums together are the ultimate entry point. You know, in a lot of ways, I know there are a lot of people that probably would just take those 2 and stop there. But if you're a music fan, I believe that there's more to dig into, okay? If you are a casual listener, and some people are, and I won't hold it against you, if you simply just want to get the 2 best, there you go. Okay, saved you a lot of time. But the other album from the classic period that I think you must have, and there might be some debate and discussion amongst this, but I think the other one has to be Propeller. I think Propeller is just as good as B1000 and Alien Lanes. I think it has as many classic songs on it. It has the incredible opening Over the Neptune Mesh Gear Fox, which I think is sort of understood as being, if there was ever a magnum opus moment, if there was ever a moment where he just got it absolutely bang on, it was there. It's almost like his A Day in the Life, Over the Neptune Mesh Gear Fox, for Bob Pollard at least. If there could be any kind of comparison, I think that would be it. So I think Propeller has to be there. It's got Exit Flagger, it's got Lethargy, it's got Unleash the Large Hearted Boy, it's got 14 Cheerleader Cold Front. Do you know what I mean? It's like a grab bag of treats. Weed Kings on it as well. Quality of Armor. Oh man, see, I can't get too involved in this fanning out stuff here. So you start with these 3. Where do you go next? There's a lot of great albums before and after, but I think as of 2026, these are the other 2 that you need definitively as the jumping off point. One of them would be Isolation Drills from 2001. Isolation Drills is kind of like, they'd tried making more hi-fi albums. I suppose Under the Bushes was the first real attempt at making something that was a bit more kind of high fidelity. Mag Earwig was definitely a bigger jump in that direction. And then Do the Collapse is a very, very hi-fi album, almost to the point of making some people uncomfortable. Isolation Drills was produced by Rob Schnaff. Is that his name? Rob Schnaff. Let me double check that here. Using Rob Schnaff. Now, he was the producer for Elliott Smith, amongst other things, but you know, you hip young kids of today all know Elliott Smith. Rob Schnaff produced Elliott Smith, and Elliott Smith plays piano. I can't remember what song it's on now. Don't quote me. Elliott Smith plays some piano on this album. They played a lot of shows together. So if you're looking for indie cool points, there you go. Guided by Voices played shows with Elliott Smith, and he played piano on Isolation Drills, produced by Rob Schnaff. It's an absolute belter of an album. It is a proper stadium-filling album. It's the kind of thing where you listen to it and you're like, yes, this band should have been massive. And then they weren't. And then, the Strokes released Is This It about a month later. And that was the end of that. But this has got, again, so many big tracks on this album. You've got Fair Touching, Chasing Heather Crazy, Twilight Campfire, you got Glad Girls. But then kind of, I think, sort of importantly enough, there's a lot of meat on the rest of the album. There's a lot of album tracks here. It's not like all hits. Like Propeller, B1000, Alien Lanes. The great thing about this album is it is just hits. It's just non-stop. But then this has got more kind of, towards, especially in the second half, tracks like Run Wild and Unspirited. And I love the end track on here, Privately, the strings and everything. It's beautiful. It's a really brilliant kind of commercial statement. If they could have made one, that's what it would have been. Now I'm going to move over to... There's a lot of different things that happen in the intervening times here. There's a lot of different albums where... when they had the original reunion in 2010 through to 2014, and then there's been so many albums since. He's been on a real run and he's focused in on Guided by Voices. I'm going to take one album from this recent period, and I'm going to take last year's Thick, Rich and Delicious. I think for the last 7 years or so, the consensus has been that Space Gun has been the definitive of the latter period, and I'm sure there are a lot of people that probably would still say that it is, but for me, I think last year, because it's a more recent, more up-to-date album, Thick, Rich and Delicious was my favourite album of last year, no bias at all. It's absolutely just spot on. Again, I suppose it's kind of an update, if you will, following on the kind of thematic of Alien Lanes and Isolation Drills as being kind of these amazing, they could have been massive hits if anyone paid attention kind of albums. Thick, Rich and Delicious is the kind of update on that, I think. It's full of potential hits for a band with a lead singer who's approaching 70. It's just the way that it is. Bob is on a different level. Anyway, I don't want to fan out too much. The important thing is, I think those are the 5 albums studio albums from Guided by Voices, B1000, Alien Lanes, Propeller, Isolation Drills, Thick, Rich and Delicious. If you start with those 5, I think you have enough to go off of. There are other there's more stranger albums if you want something a little bit more off the beaten track. The album they made after Isolation Drills, Universal Truths and Cycles, has a lot of fans. It's a brilliant album. There's more recent, they did a couple of double LPs, Zeppelin Over China and August by Cake, which are very interesting. There's a lot of different ideas on there. There's a lot, but again, I don't want to get too bogged down in the kind of ins and outs of it all, because I'll let you delve into that. I'm a big fan of the earlier albums as well, and all the ones in between. There isn't a bad album there. There really isn't. I know that sounds ridiculous to say. Now, we get on to, I'm just going to give you a brief rundown of, here's a quick rundown of all of the solo. So there's the solo albums, of which there's about 20 odd. Then there's a couple of EPs under Robert Pollard and such, LPs and EPs with different names. And then there's, okay, just bear with me on this. I'm going to do this as quickly as I can. There's, and this is in chronological order. There is an EP under the name Lexo and the Leapers. There is an album under the name Nightwalker, which is like experimental stuff. There's an album that's kind of like a jam from 1990 they put out. It's called Hazard Hot Rods. There's an album called, an EP, called Howling Wolf Orchestra. There is 2 albums under the name Airport 5, which is Bob and Tobin Sprout, who's the main collaborator in the classic era. There's a band called Circus Devils. Circus Devils is fascinating. It's Bob with Todd and Tim Tobias, and it's very, very experimental. It's really good. I'm not going to recommend any of those albums today because I think it's a special thing. I'm going to do a different video on it because I think it deserves that. Then there's an album under the name Go Back Snowball with Mac from Superchunk. There's 3 albums of old experimental material from the 80s under the name Acid Ranch. There's an album, a Phantom Tollbooth album, which is a band from the 80s. He took one of their albums and re-recorded the vocals and did new lyrics and melodies, did his own thing over the top of it. That's quite interesting. Lifeguards, which is him and Doug Gillard, Bob and Doug Gillard doing, it's quite proggy. That's got a lot of fans. You've got the Moping Swans, which is 1 EP. You've got the Keane Brothers, which is Bob and Tommy Keane, who's a power pop legend. I'll do a video one day. The Takeovers, which is Bob and Chris Sluzarenko. They did 2 albums together. There's Psycho and the Birds, 2 albums and an EP, which is Bob and Todd Tobias from the Circus Devils. There's Boston Spaceships, 5 albums, incredible. One of the best side projects. One of the absolute best side projects, and we'll come back to that later. There's an EP under the name Carbon Whales from 2008. There's a band called Cosmos, 1 album. Mars Classroom, 1 album, banging album. Sunflower Logic, which did 1 EP. Teenage Guitar, which is Bob playing experimental music all on his own. 2 albums there. After the reunion of Guided by Voices broke up, there was a band called Ricked Wiki. In 2015, he did 3 singles and 3 LPs. And this included Todd Tobias from Circus Devils, Nick Mitchell on guitar, and Kevin March on drums. There was ESP Ohio a year later, which had Doug Gillard, Mark Shue, who's been the bass player for Guided by Voices for 10 years, and the in-house Bob Pollard GBV producer, Travis Harrison. That was 1 album they made. Then you get one of the most interesting, one of my favorites, which is Cash Rivers. There's going to be a new album coming out this year from Cash Rivers. It's like bizarro country. I love it so much. Then there's Cub Scout Bowling Pins, which is something they did during the lockdown, an EP and an album, which is the members of Guided by Voices. It's very, very power pop, really cool. And then there's Rip Van Winkle, which is now being called US Rip Van Winkle. They did an EP and an album last year, and there's going to be another one coming out very soon. And that brings us just about up to date. I did that as quickly as I could, okay? I tried not to get too sidetracked. And this also doesn't include, by the way, all of the EPs under Guided by Voices. There's 19 Guided by Voices EPs. There's 3 Guided by Voices live albums. That's official. There's loads of unofficial ones. 12 compilation albums, including 4 albums under the name Suitcase, which have 100 songs on them each. 39 singles. 6 box sets. Man, it just goes on and on and on. And then this isn't even including his art. He's got books of art and collage work. Man, it is mental. Yeah. My favourite artist makes more stuff than your favourite artist. It's just that's the way it goes. So, now that we've got to it, I'm going to list these off. These are 5 non-GBV albums that I think you should check out. Off the top of the dome, we're going to have Speak Kindly of Your Volunteer Fire Department from 1999, which is Robert Pollard and Doug Gillard. That is, in my head, a canon album. For me, I put that in the oeuvre. For me, that whole early period of his solo work, it counts as GBV in my head. His first proper solo album, once GBV was over, was a double LP called From a Compound Eye. That's to me where it kind of starts. I see all of those other albums as being, they're just in there. It's incredible. And I would include, if you're trying to get into this stuff, I would include his first solo album as well, Not in My Air Force. So yeah, Speak Kindly of the Volunteer Fire Department, Robert Pollard and Doug Gillard. And Robert Pollard, 1996, Not in My Air Force. And I was going to say Kid Marine, but actually we might include Kid Marine. I purposefully didn't list this. I wanted to go through these with you and really take it in. I would have Keane Brothers Blues and Boogie Shoes. I think that's a really, really fantastic album that is quite accessible. A lot of the more experimental stuff, I don't want to put people off. I want people to get into this music. You must understand. So I would take that one. I would take a Boston Spaceships album. I think I would go with 0 to 99. I think out of the Boston Spaceships albums. But you could, I honestly, you could pick any of the 5 Boston Spaceships studio LPs. Brown Submarine, Planets Are Blasted, 0 to 99, Our Cube House Still Rocks, and Let It Beard are all exceptional. But I'm going to say 0 to 99 by Boston Spaceships. Yeah, and I'm tempted to take the Mars Classroom album as well, because that's really accessible, but I feel like we've got the power pop thing covered on the Keane Brothers album. So do we take something a little bit more off the beaten track? I actually think, if you can humour me for a second, if you were to include absolutely. What am I talking about? You could take the first Suitcase, compilation, because although it's under the GBV name, it's much more his at home, and that's probably a good jumping off point for the slightly more experimental stuff. So that leaves us with Speak Kindly of Your Volunteer Fire Department, Not in My Air Force, Keane Brothers Blues and Boogie Shoes, Boston Spaceship 0 to 99, and the first Suitcase. That's your jumping off point into the rest of it. Therefore, giving us a full, if you combine that with B1000, Alien Lanes, Propeller, Isolation Drills, Thick, Rich and Delicious, I'm saying Robert Pollard, Not in My Air Force, Robert Pollard and Doug Gillard, Speak Kindly of a Volunteer Fire Department, Keane Brothers, Blues and Boogie Shoes, Boston Spaceship 0 to 99, and the first Suitcase compilation. That is as good an entry point into the hundreds of albums that are available here. 100 and... God, it must be getting on for 150 at this point. If you included all the EPs, it's well into 200 now. But there you go. Those 10 will absolutely sort you out. That was difficult. That was more difficult than I thought it was going to be. I thought when I sat here, I was like, I know what I'm picking. I knew in the back of my mind I was going to pick Volunteer Fire Department and Not in My Air Force and Keane Brothers. And then I started looking at it from a compound eye, and I'm still looking at it from a compound eye. See, this is the problem. Once you know it, this massive list of albums doesn't seem so massive. You know, Kid Marine, Jesus, it's brilliant. And then you've got like Moses on a Snail, and I don't want to scare you off, but and as I say, I've left Circus Devils separate for a good reason. I thought this video was going to be about 10 minutes, so we're nearly at 20. Again, sums it up. It just sums it up. This is what happens. This is what happens when you fall in love with this band. And with Bob Pollard, the music, it just takes over. I don't really know how I've got time to do anything else with my life. And maybe I shouldn't. For the good of the human race. Anyway, thank you very, very much, people. We'll see you next time. And we're going to end it on a A major 7th. I should have tuned it before I did that.